Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is following along us, and thank you for joining on a Saturday morning or evening. I appreciate you taking time to be here and learn something and give us more energy and more support for this particular program. So, welcome everyone. And today I have with me Prasad and Abhijit would be joining soon. Yeah, but there are some, we have like three people today to help you out and keep your questions coming. We would be happy to answer as many questions as we can. So, let me add Prasad. Prasad, are you on camera?
I can come on camera. Hello,
Yeah.
everyone.
Hello. Good. Thank you. So we will go through single agenda. I already pushed the agenda on LinkedIn. Some of you are here for first time probably. So I will just give you an idea that we run this program every Saturday, 9 a.m. GMT to 11 a.m. GMT, 2 hours, and we talk about technical things. We talk about networking stuff, and then we will be talking about some of the hands-on activities also. So hopefully you would enjoy and you will learn something. And if there is any feedback, feel free to let us know. Any agenda items you want to add, anything you want help with, reach out to us on LinkedIn and we would be happy to help you in all the ways we can. So, hopefully, you would enjoy and you would be learning something new today. So I will start with some basic stuff and then Prasad would take over and we'll talk about the hands-on. So today we will talk about three things. Technical track, I'll talk about Amazon S3 here, storage in cloud. Then we will talk about networking track. We'll see how networking works into cloud. And at the end, Prasad would help us with the hands-on how to utilize S3 and deploy some solution or have some hands-on experience using Amazon S3. All right. So
One
enjoy
question
your
before
day.
we
Go
start
ahead, sir. Yes, sir.
is like, has everyone now created AWS account? Last
Yeah,
time there
that's a
were
good question.
last time there were few people who did not have AWS account. Now as we are getting into it, and we will be doing some hands-on. Everyone has AWS accounts.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Great.
that would be nice. Yeah, that would give you lots of good experience. And when you do things, you retain that knowledge. You just like learn something, but you actually can say, hey, I've done it. And it will give you more confidence in your interviews or in any preparation of certification or whatever. So that's a good thing. And a lot of
Cool.
people are saying yes. And be
Yeah.
mindful of the cost, right, Prasad?
Exactly. That's what I was about. The next question was, have you set up your billing alerts? Have
Yes,
you
yeah,
secured
that is
your root
important.
account?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
So ensure that you do those basic steps before you start playing on. Because see, from this week, as Ashish will start covering more and more technical stuff about the AWS core services, right? Like we'll start with storage, then we'll go to compute and database. We will talk about the hands-on activities. Like in 30 minutes, we'll showcase few things, but then there will be a lot of workshops that you can do in your own time to learn, and then there might be a cost associated with it. So ensure that
exactly.
you have the billing alerts set up and you are using the free tier appropriately, not leaving the resources, a provisioned, like deprovision once you complete your lab, clean up your AWS accounts so that you don't incur any charges.
Exactly. Nice tip. Now, Divyam had a question. Can you please update the resources of week one? I did it last night. I hope I have did the commit in GitHub. So can you please check? It should be there. Week one resources should be there. I have put them into like batch three in the resource section and week one. So the content should be there. Let me know if you find any errors there. I did it very late night yesterday, so little dizzy that time. But yeah, hopefully everything would be there. Now we have Abhijit also. Hey Abhijit, good morning. I'll add you to stream.
Morning, everyone. Morning, good
How you?
afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. It's
Oh, good,
Saturday
good,
morning,
nice.
and I especially like that background music before actual streaming started. That's like a good kick for the morning to start.
Yeah, means and it's a good audio checker also, right? Isn't it? Like otherwise people say, "Hey, I'm not listening," and
Yeah,
somebody's speaking, but at least when you hear music, you know that you are well connected. Good.
absolutely.
All right, thank you. So thanks for sharing that link here. GitHub link is there, so please get that. And I'll quickly start now without wasting much of the time. I'll be then going off camera and helping you to understand and focus more on the content related to AWS, Amazon S3. And I'll talk about the basics first, as I do always, and then we will go into the detail of implementation. So let's first talk about some of the basic stuff related to storage into the cloud. Now, storage is an integral part, right? In last trainings, we have discussed about the global infrastructure. We talked about region, availability zone, edge location, and how all these physical components help you to build your solution. And once you have sorted this thing out, when you know which region you are going to use, afterward, you would start looking for platform-based services. Now, foundational services, I would say, these foundational services are compute, networking, and storage. Now, it depends on how people want to view it. Sometimes people would add database also in foundation, but I say database lives on top of compute, networking, and storage. So I would consider it as a platform service, but you could also call it as a foundational service. But for any application you run, you would need three components. Compute, anytime a code is running, you would need to process that code, right? It is Java, .NET, PHP, whatever, or you are just authenticating through login. You are verifying a user is valid or not. For that, you would need some processing power. So that is provided by compute. Networking, obviously, you would need to have connectivity to other system or maybe connectivity so users can access your application. So that would come on networking. And then you have to keep your data and store your data for long term or maybe short term, whatever the requirement is, that will be called your storage. So these are three basic foundation services. Whatever you build in some shape or form, you would use compute, networking, and storage. And we will start focusing on these two things. And once your foundation services has been sorted, what you can do, you could leverage some higher level services, sometimes referred as platform services. Like you can have deployment management, you can run analytics on top of it, you can run product catalog. So lots of things can happen once you have done all these things. Right now I am focusing on storage, and then we will focus on the networking part also as part of networking track. All right. Now, storage in AWS Cloud. Now, storage can be of different types. So I will first give you the basic examples of storage, and then we will go for the implementation detail. When you are a solution architect, knowing the why is more important. Sometimes when we are learning technology, we are just focused on like what this technology is, or how to implement this particular solution, or when to implement this solution. That's all. But here the importance for a solution architect would be that why I am actually implementing that, what business problem I am trying to solve. So that would be a very, very important aspect of whatever you do into any type of environment. So always think why this technology, why we have to go ahead with this type of architecture, why not other architecture. So why is very important if you are looking for a solution architect to be in making. So let's go ahead and talk about storage. So there are three type of common storages you will find into AWS. Sorry, not in AWS, but all the places, right? You have three common storage type. One is called block storage, second is called file storage, and third is called object storage. They have specific use cases. Think of it like you have cars. Now, there would be a family car, there would be a racing car, there would be a high end, your luxurious car. So it depends what your use case is and what problem you are trying to solve, and that's why you would get that. Right. So let's focus on what is block, what is file, and object storage, and I'll give you example of each of that so that you could relate these things in your real life. Now, as an analogy, consider that you have a piece of land. Right? Hopefully, you acquired that piece of land, and now you could decide that, hey, I am going to divide this piece of land. I would be creating a garden in this place. Maybe on this section, I would be building a house, and in this section, I would be keeping a open area. I won't be doing it anything here, and maybe here I would be creating a storage. So what you did, you basically bought a piece of land and then you divided it, you partition it into your own requirement, and in that partition you could do different thing. Like garden would be looking different, your house would require solid floor, so you would have that. In garden you would not have a solid floor, but you would have a muddy floor. And then maybe in your storage you would have a different type of flooring, maybe to protect it from flooding or something. So that what we are doing here, we are trying to have a storage and then divide it for our own usage depending on what we are planning to achieve from this. That is called your block storage. So block storage is where I would have given a block of storage and then I decided what is going to be my usage of it. Think as a piece of land. You could decide here to build garden, open space, parking, depending on your business requirement, right? Now, How it relates to your computing world? Consider you got an hard disk like in your laptop or in your desktop. Now, most of the laptop only have just one partition. If I'm talking about Windows, it would be C drive, most of this, right? But if you want, you could go ahead and say, hey, I would be creating one more partition. I would be using this as a C drive and I would be using as another D drive. And maybe I would keep my backups here or I would keep my logs here. And on C drive, I would just keep my operating system. So that can be one option for you. You could have the same disk divided logically to keep separation. And if you are little more techy, what you could have also done, you could have said, instead of creating a D drive here, I would create a partition. Here I would run Windows based operating system, and here I would be running Linux or any other operating system. So this is a dual boot, same disk but logically partitioned to accommodate multiple operating system inside. That is completely possible. So that is your block storage, where you have flexibility to create partition and format those partition as per your use cases, right? All your laptop hard disk, all your server hard disk, or when you are creating an Amazon EC2 instance, they are all having a block storage associated with that. If you're coming from on-prem world, if you have heard about SAN storages, so when you are creating a SAN, and in that we create something called a LUN, logical unit number. SAN stand for storage area network. This is purely a on-prem environment world technology. You would be presenting this LUN to a server, and then the server can format it, partition it the way it wants. So that's what is a block storage, right? Keep your questions coming. If there are any technical questions you are not clear, I'm monitoring the chat and I would be happy to answer those questions as they come. Consider file storage. I take an example here of an apartment. So in an apartment, what you could do, you could have a place given to you. So let's say this is a whole building, and in that this is a floor, and on that floor there is apartment number one, apartment number two, and apartment number three. So these type of apartment are there. Now I can't go ahead and say, okay, I would be breaking a wall here and will create a door here. That is not possible. You can't do that. That is not technically allowed to happen into this apartment. What you could do within your apartment boundary, you could go ahead and say, I would be changing the carpet, or I would be having a different color on the wall, or I would be changing the location of closet here and storage here, and I may be having a different type of a stove into my kitchen. That is all possible. But you cannot make changes which would be affecting others, like creating a door here, or maybe saying I would be blocking the door here. Those type of things can't happen because you are sharing the space. Same thing applies on file storage. What happens in case of file storage? Somebody would set up a file server for you, and they would be giving you permission to access this file server. They may give you different type of permission, and it is expected that a file server would be accessed by multiple people. So some of them may have a read write access, some may have only read access, and some of you may have full access on top of it. But you can't say that, if even if I have a full access, I can't say I would go ahead and delete the whole file server or format the file server. I am allowed to perform only file label operation, nothing beyond it. So that is my file storage. We'll think like an apartment, right? Hope everyone is following along. The third one here is a object storage. This is relatively new to some people. Think of the storage units. So in this storage unit, let's say if you are traveling from, or you are shifting from one place to another, and you are looking for a place to keep some of the stuff, you could rent the storage units like this. And in this storage unit, either they would charge you for the number of boxes you keep inside, or they would be charging you based on the whole unit you are consuming, or how many number of units you consume. But these are not designed for humans to live. These are designed only to be kept with stuff. You could keep on adding stuff. You would have your own lock and key, and when you need it, you would have access to it, and you should have no problem in keeping as much physically possible inside the storage unit. And you would be paying probably charges based on the unit you consume, or maybe based on number of boxes you consume or store into these places. So hopefully this thing is clear, that what is a object type of storage, what is a storage unit. I'll paint a picture of technical stuff in a minute, so you would have a better understanding on that, right? So storage type In block storage, the unit of transaction is block. What I mean by that, behind the scene, there would be some disk. Let me call it HDD, hard disk drive. This hard disk drive is controlled by an operating system running on top of it. On top of that operating system, you would have your application running. Let's say you are running MS Word as an application. Now, Word doesn't know how to create a block or how to store a file. But it can, when you create a new file in MS Word, it would just inform operating system and say, hey, I have a new file and I want to store it. What operating system would be doing, it will find out that where is the space on hard disk, and in those blocks of hard disk my file would be stored. File may be split across multiple blocks and then it would be stored. It may not be one single block which I am consuming for my file. So that is not my application's responsibility. It just talks to operating system, and operating system figures out what blocks to be allocated. So my file or data is stored into blocks. It is created by operating system, right? So unit of transaction is block. When I'm talking about file storage, my transaction unit is file. We will create file, update file, modify file. That will all happen through file storage. That's what we would be doing. And when we are talking about object storage, we store objects here. Now, object confuses a lot of people. It is a fancy word for files which has metadata information, some additional information which we have put, that will be called my metadata information. Let's say you have a box to ship to someone. On that box, you could put a sticker and say this has to go to the buy, or this is going to be on a urgent basis delivery or a fast delivery. Maybe you could put inside that this is a fragile item inside. Maybe you could put that this one has some XYZ type of stuff inside. So additional information which you have added to the box, that is your metadata. So metadata would ensure that you can identify various aspects of the object. You can run some additional queries on top of it based on metadata. So additional information which is we are adding is referred as a file metadata, right? Now, examples here. If you are using a laptop disk or a server disk where you see boot partition or data drive, this is your block object. File storage, when you are connecting to a server in a format slash slash server slash share name, that is your file storage. And if you have ever used OneDrive, Google Drive, or Dropbox, they are all referred as your object storage. That doesn't understand the details of the object. You store a file or a photo or a video, it doesn't matter. It would just be adding that as an object. So those are all my object storages, right? How you update, this is important. Now, in block storage, you can directly update the file. Means your application would say, I want to update something, and then that will be request going to operating system, and operating system would update the file for you. Same happens in file storage. When I'm saying file storage is again basically a server behind the scene who has some operating system running which can accept the connection, and it has lot of storage associated. So whatever request you say, I want to create a file, it is accepted by operating system here, and it will go ahead and add capacity or modify whatever you require. Shouldn't be a problem. Some of the file format used for data engineering in this object storage, it could be anything, Samuel. We do not have any specific format to use, right? So maybe you have generated your CV, which is in doc format, or you have a document which is PDF, or you have a MP4 file, or you have a CSV file. It doesn't matter. You could store as much as you want in object storage, and it doesn't care about file format. For the object storage, it is just a sequence of ones and zeros, nothing else. So it just thinks that there is some data written into 10 format, nothing else. That is what we mean by an object, right? So is file storage same as NFS? Answer is yes. File storage is an concept, and to perform access to this file, you would be using some protocol. NFS is the protocol we use, but name of the protocol and the storage unit is so interchangeably used that we just call it NFS share. But NFS technically is a protocol used to access the file server, which is hosting the file system you want. Samba server, yes, exactly. Samba is also one of the product which is a file server, and you could have connect to it using NFS protocol. And some more protocol which I'll talk about is CIFS, Common Internet File System. This is more fine-tuned towards Windows-based user. NFS is fine-tuned towards Linux-based user, but they both are protocol by which we can access it. How this is different from EFS, we will talk about that. We'll discuss that. Like we have block storage used for booting purpose, can object storage used for similar purpose, or it is just a storing purpose? Prashant, no, you can't boot from object storage. Think about my example. The storage unit. Can you live with your family in a storage unit? Answer is no, it is not designed for it. It may not have hot water, cooling, the electricity supply. So it is not designed for it. It is designed to only keep, it is like your garage. You can't live into garage long time. So it is not designed for booting. Object storage cannot be used for boot. For booting, you would need always a block storage. Your operating system would need a block level access. Okay, good. Now, so how you can update things? In case of both type of storage, which is file and your block, you can update directly, should not be a problem. But when it comes to object, you cannot update object directly. The example I give here, let me go back to the screen here so that you would have a better idea. See this. So let's say this is a box here, if you can see here in the corner. If I have to update something in that, maybe I want to get something out or add something inside the box. There is no space within the unit. So what I have to do, I have to get the box out, modify the content of it whatever I want, and then push box back in. That's how I would modify. So we cannot add object, we cannot modify object in object storage. There is no edit command, there is no modify command available. What you do, you just create a new version of the object and keep both the version old and new, or you just overwrite the object, but there is no edit command in object storage. Now, some software would give you impression like you are editing it, but actually you are just replacing it. Let's say you have a file in Google Drive and you opened it and modified something, so you feel that I am going to utilize a file storage, but it is not. Temporarily that file is open into some program and then changes are stored there, right? So how about AWS FSx? We are coming to that. Just hold on to that question, we will talk about that. So hopefully this thing is clear, that how can you update? You cannot update the object directly. You create a new version of the object and replace the existing one, or keep multiple version of the same object. So you can keep multiple object, shouldn't be a problem at all. So yes, you can do that. Right now, this is the thing which we were discussing, like talking about the protocols associated. Sorry. So protocols which we could use is SCSI, Fiber channel, serial ATA, WinBlock, SMB, CIFS, NFS. These are the protocol used to access file storage. And when it is object storage, you mostly access object using HTTP or HTTPS, and then you utilize REST and SOAP kind of a thing on that. Right. So that is what we do with the object storages model. Right. Additional, sorry, I'm not sure my mouse is not working as expected. Give me a minute. Yeah. So support for metadata. With block and file storage, we do not have metadata support. The tags which I told you, additional information which I want to keep, that is not there with my with my block and file. But with object storage, we have support metadata. We can add extra information, like on that shipping box, you can add different label like a barcode, like address, to, from, priority shipping or not. So that is what we mean by a custom metadata which we can add on it. Now, this is theoretical concept, how AWS implement these things. So probably you will get some answers here. If you are using services in Amazon, which is Amazon EBS or Amazon Instant Store, that is a form of a block storage given to you. If you have used EFS, Amazon EFS service, Amazon FSx service, they are example of a file storage service. So EFS is fine-tuned, as I said, is for Linux-based operating system, and FSx is fine-tuned for Windows-based operating system. So depending on your use case, you could utilize these all type of things, right? So that's how these things are. Now, object storage is having two options here, which is your Amazon S3 and Amazon Glacier. You could utilize those two things, should not be a problem. So this is the example of block, file, and object storage. Now, a good question from Junior Barth. Why is block storage faster than other type? Let me try to draw that so that you would have a better understanding on that. Right. So let's say this is my disk. Let me use a different color. If it is my block storage, my operating system directly has access to the disk. So my application, whoever is running here, would just talk to this operating system and I would be able to communicate on that. The protocol which is used for communication here is called SCSI protocol. Small computer system interface. You can read more on that. And SCSI is designed for this type of data operation like reading block, writing block, and all. So this happens in your block storage because your operating system is sending SCSI command to the disk. Now this disk could be a local disk on the server itself, or it could be a remote disk like a SAN storage associated. So that is block. So command is SCSI, which is directly going to the operating system or from operating system to the disk. When I'm talking about network, so let's say this is my file system. Now file system is mostly over network, right? So in front there will be a server and that server would have some storage associated and you would be accessing this over the network, right? Now network, what we are using behind the scene we are using TCP IP protocol, and on top of the TCP IP protocol, then we use NFS or we use CIFS. So what is happening now? I am making a long distance call first thing, and I am using a protocol which is not designed for heavy data transfer. It is basically designed for request and response and smaller size of packet size, whereas the SCSI, the block size is much higher. In TCP IP, the packet size is much smaller, and that's why this this file storage would be slower for you rather than a block. Same happens in object. So when you are accessing a object storage, your requests are going to that object storage over HTTP or HTTPS. These protocols are not designed for huge data transfer, whereas SCSI is designed for huge data transfer, and that's why block is always faster than any of them. Because here what happens, your packet is created, then that packet will go through encapsulation, another layer, and then it is sent. So that will be adding a lot of burden, and then packaging and repackaging and then encapsulation, decapsulation. That's why block is always faster because of the protocol used behind the scene, right? So I hope that would be a better idea giving you that how all these things work. If your questions get answered, let us know in the chat that you are able to get the answer, and if you have any follow-up question, put that there too. Sam says, as EBS is a network attached volume, how does it achieve fast processing while updating an existing file? As I understand, it only replaces the change block. So there is some protocols behind the scene. Now, what happens that behind the scene, if I go ahead, there is a network which is called SAN, storage area network. Most of the time, it is designed using fiber optic cables, most of the time. And this is able to carry huge volume of data, and then it will see whenever you are using a block storage, that is your, let's say, hard disk remotely, though it is blocked, but there is still some operating system running here who would take care of operation, or the software which is running in your storage array. So that storage array software would be getting information that okay, file has been updated, which blocks has to be changed, and it will just send that information. So though it looks that it is happening over network, first thing, it is happening over fiber optic network most of the time. And wherever your storage exists, that storage would have its own management software, or you can think of like a small operating system fine-tuned to run these operations. So that's how it runs, right? Okay, let's move forward. So hopefully the storage types are clear. Now my focus here is on a storage which is called Amazon S3. Amazon S3 is the name is simple storage service, a service which exists from 2006 onwards and still growing. There is always lots of new features being added in that. So that is called my simple storage service. Here, the concept is bucket. So to get started with Amazon S3, what you have to do first, you have to create something called a bucket. Bucket is same like a folder which you create, similar, right? It's just an example. So like you create folder in your traditional operating system, you will create a folder, and that is referred as a bucket here into AWS world. And in like in folder you keep files, in bucket you would be keeping something called objects. So object is what I want to store, and I would be accessing it over HTTP method, and I would perform some operation on that. So what I'll do, I'll quickly go to console and walk you through the small process of creating a bucket, and then we will see some additional stuff around it. So I'm here, and now I am utilizing AWS console. Probably everyone knows about it, and Prasad would talk about more interesting stuff to do with Amazon S3 and hands-on, but I'm quickly showing you how to create a bucket and then how to update objects inside it. Whatever I'm doing here from the graphical interface, the same can be done from command line. The same thing can be achieved using your API or SDK call also, should not be a problem. So as soon as I come to S3, you would see here that it shows global. S3 namespace or the bucket name which you create is a global, but when you create a bucket, that bucket is a regional entity. So let me say create a bucket. If I'm trying to create a bucket with the name test, and I'm selecting US S2 as a region, and I go ahead and say let me create a bucket, I won't be allowed because this bucket name may have already existed. So let me go ahead and create a bucket called BESA and 18 Feb 2023 just to make it unique. And I could have selected any of the regions. As you see, these are all the regions where I could have hosted my bucket. Let's say I say I would be hosting it into EU Ireland. I won't change any default ownership as of now. Block public access is also there. I'll keep it, and I just go ahead and say create a bucket. So bucket is a placeholder which will get a unique name assigned as we have seen, and I could search for that bucket here. This is my bucket which has been created. Now, does it bucket having any object? Answer is no. So there is nothing inside. What I could do, I could go ahead and upload some objects inside. Should not be a problem. So I could go ahead and say, hey, I want to add some files. Give me a minute. And let's say I go ahead and put like a summary card of AWS. That is a file I selected, 169 KB. So it detected that it is a PDF file. It is smart enough. And this will be going into this namespace like you have a HTTP address. This is a S3 address with the name of the bucket. That is my destination. And if I want to change some properties like storage classes, or maybe enable encryption, or maybe add additional checksum information, or add tags like we were talking about, we could do that. But I am keeping it simple, and I just created a upload of object into Amazon S3. Right. What Amazon S3 did now, it has created a unique URL for this particular object. Whatever I am storing will be given a unique URL to identify that object and to access that object. Objects are private by default. Unless I make them public, nobody can access it. Only I as a owner I am allowed to access it, but this is my object URL. Let's read what is into this object URL. I'll put it into a notepad so that you could easily see this into a little bigger font. So what we see here, HTTPS, endpoint is HTTPS. We are trying to talk to a bucket BESA 18 Feb 2023 in a service called S3 in EU West 1, which is Ireland region, Amazon AWS.com, and this here is my object name. Object name in S3 is called as key, right? So my object here is a summary card.aws.pdf, right? What bucket can give you, we can go ahead and add folders here in the bucket itself if I need to. So I have created this bucket, and if I feel now I have to add more folders inside, no problem. See this option, I could say create a folder and call it, let's say it is my PDF files. I could go ahead and create a folder, and done, folder is created. Now for you and me, it is looking like a folder, but behind the scene, it is just a namespace. And if I go into this PDF folder now and I upload a file inside it again, Let's go ahead and add additional file inside. Let's say I go ahead and add this summary card cloud computing inside. That is the object I am uploading, and I just clicked on upload. This will again get a unique URL. We will see that what the URL is in a minute. My object is there, and then we would be successfully uploaded it. And let me close that. So this is my object. Now its URL would be little different. We'll be having a PDF as a folder name here. See this. Now, for the first object, my key was summary card aws.pdf. So this was the first object key. My second object key is this whole stuff. So for you and me, it would look like that, hey, we have a folder structure, but S3 just says, I have an object whose name is summary card aws.pdf, and I have another object whose name is pdf slash summary card cloud computing.pdf. So for you and me, it may give a impression that there is a folder structure, but for S3 behind the scene, we are trying to create a flat structure, and this whole name or what we call prefix is allowing you to have a folder like structure, but behind the scene it is a flat way of storing your data, right? So hopefully this thing is clear. Shri on Cloud says that is S3 created in a particular region? Yes, answer is S3 service is global. So the namespace you create for a bucket should be globally unique. But whenever you create a bucket, that bucket exists within one region only. So when you create a bucket, you have to select which region, and only then a bucket would be created. Why we do that? Because you may have some legal requirement that I am storing data of, let's say, credit card information, and that is for a specific country people. So I can't keep that data away to all other location. If I'm, let's say, working in EU, my compliance requirement may say that this data has to be kept in European Union. So I have to create a bucket, and that bucket would never copy data outside of the region unless you specify so. Right. So behind the scene, what happens as soon as I'm uploading an object? Let's say this is the object I uploaded. In most cases, what would happen? You would have, or I would say in every case, you would have three copies of that object happening automatically. We want to give you durability that if you have a specific use case of keeping an object, so you uploaded a file, let's say a.txt, behind the scene, S3 would create three copy of that a.txt file. Idea is even if one of them fails, we are able to recover from the failed copies if something goes wrong. So that is what a file would be or object would be copied to. Minimum three copies of an object would be maintained, right? And possibility is if you have used something like a S3 standard tier, in S3 standard tier, probably these copies would be created into different availability zone. So one copy into AZA, another into AZB, and another into AZC. So even if one of the availability zone goes down, you won't have a problem in accessing that data. And that excess of data which you can anytime get it, that is durability and availability. Right. So I'll talk about that in a minute. So bucket is regional entity. Whatever you store has to go into a region. S3 makes copy by default. Answer is yes. It will automatically make copy. You won't be seeing that, but automatically to maintain the durability we promise, which is 11.9, yes, copies are maintained. So here the bucket is the storage box. Object is using folder created in the content into as per example from our object storage. Yes. So S3 is a object storage. In that you create bucket, and in that bucket you would be further creating object. This is how the structure is. You can't have a bucket inside a bucket. You would always be having S3 namespace, and you would start adding your bucket, and then you would keep on adding object inside. Object may have a name like a.txt, or it may have a name like folder slash a.txt. It doesn't matter. This is for you as a human to understand. For S3, it is one object with the name folder a.txt and another object with the name a.txt. Right. Okay. Are S3 object encrypted by default when we upload to bucket, or do we need to enable encryption? That's a good point. Now there is a change recently, very recently, few days back only. What we have now, that any new bucket you create, new, they would have encryption enabled by default, not the previous one, right? So for previous, encryption was optional, but for newer bucket, encryption is mandatorily automatically enforced for you. So that should not be having a problem. Now every new bucket you create is automatically storing your data into an encrypted format. Good. So what happens here, that we could have bucket which is regional, we can have durability 11.9, and then availability. Plus availability is 99 per x percent. Durability, I would say durability is basically meaning the retention of the object. So if I have some outage, will my data will be still retained? I would be saying yes, because we give you 11.9 of durability retention. Availability is the access of the object. Can I access that object right now or not? But they are two different things. I use a very basic example to explain durability and availability because people feel confused on that. Let's say this is office building you work on, and this building operate from 6 a.m. to 12 to 11 p.m. let's say. So only this time you can physically enter into this building, right? You forgot your laptop here. You went to a party in the evening, you got late, and now you can't enter into the building because the building has closed. That doesn't mean that my laptop got stolen. Laptop is still there. When in the morning I would have access to the building, I would still be able to get my laptop back. So my laptop is retained into the building, but I can't access it now. My access is limited right now because I am beyond the time when the building opens up. Right. This one is your availability. Is my data available right now? Is my laptop available right now? Answer is no, because I am beyond the time. But is my data or laptop retained? Answer is yes. This one is called your durability, right? So S3 stores your data, let's say, into a region. Let's say this is region 1, and in that region, your data is stored across 3 availability zone, right? Your data is stored here. Now, if there is a network outage, what may happen, that you may not be able to connect to the region, right? So I am not able to access my data right now, but my data is still there. Once the network problem is solved, I would be able to get my data again, and that is called my availability of the data. So these two sound similar, but they are different, durability and availability. And the maximum object size you could have for S3 is 5 terabyte. So you would be keeping at least 5 terabyte of that data. Maximum size can be 5 terabyte. S3 storage files in 3 places. I assume the storage will grow exponentially. How storage is managed by AWS? Surya, it is secret sauce. Means it probably AWS won't tell you that how they manage it. And think from a customer perspective. I'm not interested in, let's say I go to McDonald's and I order something. I am interested in that, hey, I want my burger. Now, where the bun come for it, how they source the ingredient, who made it in for my kitchen, I don't care. The SLA is once I place an order, in 15 minutes, my product should be with me. And that's all I'm worried about. As a customer, you should not be thinking about what actually is happening behind the scene, and that will be all done by service provider. And probably, even if you know that, it won't help you because we are governing a SLA that we say we will design our storage for this type of durability. So that is all. Then you are just following that, and then you can, if we cannot fulfill that SLA, then we would have some penalty, and we would be able to like pay you in some credit or do some other things. So that is a SLA. So what happens behind the scene, like I ordered something from online, how and who shipped it to me, I don't care. I want a service, and that is coming to me, and that's what is cloud about. You have a SLA, and the service provider would fulfill that SLA for you. Doesn't matter how they do it, right? So S3 can be used for lots of things, can host a static website also for you. Compute, you could get compute on that. Like you pay for compute, number of requests which is coming to S3, you will pay for that. Storage, you will be paying for capacity you are using to keep your data. And if the data transfer happens, you will be paying charges for that. So most AWS services, you pay for compute, for storage, and for networking. And the same applies to Amazon S3 also, right? So I hope this is clear. Now S3 is a topic I could talk for hours and hours on that, but we have limited time. So I hope this is a good starting point for you. There are more features in S3 like versioning and replication and transfer acceleration. So I would be putting the slide deck and I would be giving you some more example here like this. So this will be in the slide deck which we will publish. Some more detail about another storage called Glacier. Then we have Snow family also. And now, if you want to learn more, I have recently published a free training on Udemy. So this training is available and it talks about all these S3 concepts which we could not cover because of the time limitation. So check this training. I'll put this link into the chat here and just bookmark it. You should be able to get this training for free in cloud in Udemy. Just go through that and all this 2 hour training will walk you through the various aspects of this thing. We could not use it. Last question I'm taking here from Abhi. If we want to store 50 terabyte of data, what can we do? Break it, right? So if you have like a whole ship to send something or whole house to send somewhere, you can't send the whole house. What you would be doing, you would be breaking it into smaller pieces. So if your one single file is 50 terabyte, I would say it is little wrong to be created. But if you have still done that, what you would be doing, you would be utilizing the approach or you would be utilizing the breaking of it, and there are ways to break it. So if you have bigger object than 5 TB, then you have to break it and put it into smaller piece. Using multi-part upload for larger file, yes, you can do that. Why not? That is also a possibility that you could go ahead and do multi-part upload in that case. So I hope everyone has followed along. And if you like this training, put rating, put some comments there so I would know and let me know what else you would like to see. So if I get time, I would publish more trainings like this to help you understand. Right. All right. Is maximum limit of 5 GB per object? No, 5 terabyte. 5 terabyte is the limit for every object. Also in this, sorry, in the slides which I would be sharing, we would have this single story or single summary page. So you would get all the details about that service. So if you are in rush, you want to understand the basics, go ahead and read this service summary slide. I would also include the service summary slide for your Amazon S3 Glacier. So you would have a better understanding on that. Right. So let's go ahead and take a short 5 minute break, not 10 minute. 10 would not work for us. So let me go ahead and put a 5 minute timer and then we will talk about the next topic, which will be networking track, right? So enjoy your 5 minute break and I'll talk to you in few minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone is back. If you are back, type in chat the dish you enjoy the most. Anyone back? Okay. Fruits. You're back, Cynthia. Okay, good, good. What is the dish you enjoy the most? For me, it is sweets. Samosa with chai. Oh, I am missing that right now. I would say, Shri. Thai green curry. I just made it yesterday, Parna. So I just made Thai green curry yesterday. Pav bhaji is evergreen. First dish, okay, chai, dal bati. Oh wow, that I come from a place. Dal bati is something very unique to that place in India. So probably a lot of people from India. Uh, thank you. And for me, I have a little sugar tooth. So anything which is having sugar in that, I make some Indian sweets at home. Last time I made something called kalakand, and it was a nice experiment. My son liked it. So yeah. So hopefully I would have more dishes. Okay, so let's keep moving forward, and now we will shift gears and talk a little bit on the networking basics. Gulab jamun, wow, thank you. Pongal, mango lassi. Come on, you are distracting me now. All right. So let's talk about networking basics now, and let's try to understand that how the networking works and what kind of options we can have in networking. We discussed about OSI model. We discussed about the IP addressing last time, and now we will expand that knowledge and see how networking works. Let's first talk about networking in physical world. So networking in physical world, if we have to connect these services, what I would have physical servers, and these physical servers have to talk to different servers altogether. And for that, what we would be needing some type of connectivity in them, and for that, we would need network interface card. You call it LAN card or Ethernet card or network interface card. That is a mechanism by which your signals are captured and transferred over the wire, or it could be over the air, which could be Wi-Fi. So physical servers would require some type of network interfaces to communicate to, and these network interfaces have to be connected to something called a network switch. And through this network switch, you are able to communicate and attach all these devices together. And one network switch, when you have, it would have a limit that it can have only 8 port or 16 port or 32 or in multiple of 2. So that many ports exist on a switch and that many devices can be connected. So obviously you would hit a limit that how many more devices you want to connect. One switch may not be sufficient enough. So probably what we would have a switch added to another switch, right? And we expanded our network. Now, if one switch could connect 64 hosts, another switch with 64, so total I could have 128 hosts created, right? So we are adding them one by one and we are creating a network. I'm just giving a basic example here. But the problem with this type of big network would be, think like you are in a big room in which there are hundreds of people and they are all chatting, they are all talking to each other. That would mean there would be a lot of noise happening, and which may not be good for some of you. So probably what we may want to divide that particular floor on different rooms. So maybe this is a meeting room, and maybe this side is a training room here, maybe this side is something else, so that we could go ahead and do that. So what we are doing here, we are creating logical partitions within it. Maybe we could put a door here and call it, this is, let's say, your development block. Maybe this there is a door, and then we can say it is a QA block. This door here, it is your office admin or HR block. So we created a logical partition on the floor. Similarly, what we would be doing, we would be creating logical partition on this network which we have created, and those are called VLAN in physical world, called virtual LAN. So virtual LAN are your logical isolation on a physical network. Like I have a VLAN here called, let's say, public, all my public facing resources put together there, or my VLAN private, all my private resources, or I have a VLAN called HR, another VLAN called dev, another VLAN called QA, and these are all logical isolations which I could create for my application. So I hope this thing is clear. What is a VLAN? Now, If these VLANs have to talk, they would require routing devices, right? So if you are into one block and you have to go to another block, you would need a corridor from which you could go and come at the other end, and same will be followed by other people also. So you need corridors to communicate across different networks, and that corridors are provided by the router. Router tells you where to go. It is like a map. If you want to go from point A to point B, you go into your Google Maps, search for destination, and it shows you route, and you can be then selecting what you are trying to go, where you are trying to go, and how you are going to. How is a switch different from a router? Good question. Let me explain that. Switch works on something called layer 2. This works on something called layer 3. Let me give an example rather than just talking technical, right? So if you are trying to talk to, let's say you are into a one switch here, and you are computer 1 here and computer 2 here. Now, if you both want to communicate, let's say you're living into the same house, what you would need, you have to just shout out and you would be able to hear to that person, or they would be able to hear you because you are into the same house, right? You do not call your son or daughter or your spouse living within the same house. You just go to them and talk. That what is happening is a layer 2 communication. You do not need a mobile device for that. So in layer 2, the addressing mechanism is called MAC addresses. And through MAC addresses, it just says, hey, I am trying to talk to someone with this detail. And then A respond, this is me, tell me what you want. So that is my layer 2. So when the packet is created, when this your, let me clear this out. So when your packet is being created, there will be MAC address added and there will be IP address added on the packet. So this is my data. On that data, there will be a MAC address, like who sent the packet, the physical device, and there will be IP address added on that, right? Like you are making a or sending a packet locally to someone. So in that case, a local courier company can forward that, and they won't need uh, the the what you call, they won't be needing the country detail for that package because this is a local packet. They know this is going to be in the same country. But if the packet has to travel to outside another country, what would be required in that case, that you would have to add country information there, and that would be a different route a packet would be following. That is your router. So router add IP addresses for your packet so that it can go beyond just network. Network switch only have capability to forward packet on a local network, but router can forward your packet onto remote network also. And the way they work, little more technical, and I would be happy to have it offline if needed. So this one is a layer 3 device. It works based on IP address in the packet, and network switches are your layer 2 device, which works based on the MAC addresses of this physical LAN card which we have created, right? Think of it that you and I call to each other using the mobile numbers we have, right? But when this mobile number are making call to each other, what is actually happening? The service provider registers the IMEI number of my mobile who is making the call, and that IMEI number is making call to another IMEI number of another person. Right. This is the service provider or your mobile provider's view. This is your view that you are making a call. So this is happening behind the scene is your switch who is talking in terms of MAC addresses, the physical addresses. What is happening here is your router who is talking in terms of IP addresses, right? So IP addresses you assign, IMEI number in your mobile assigned by the manufacturer. Same way, MAC addresses in your network card is assigned by the card manufacturer, Intel, AMD, whoever has that networking card produced or manufactured. They would hard code a stamp on it. It is like a fingerprint which you can't change. Name, I could change my name or I could keep whatever name I like. That is your IP address. So router decide on IP, MAC is used by network switches. Maybe a little longer discussion, but yeah, hopefully you have a better idea now. Okay. All right. So once we have sorted this thing, probably we may also want to go and talk to internet. You are welcome, Parna. So we would go to internet and we want to communicate there. Switch intra-network MAC addresses, router inter-network IP address. Good summary there, Vidhata. Thank you. Now, when I'm trying to talk to internet, probably I would also put some firewalls because internet is not considered the safest network. So I would have a firewall added, and that firewall probably would have an internet router who would connect me to the outside world, and that's how my communication would be established. This is a very basic network you have. Now, if I'm talking about a home network, probably functionality of these three devices, router, firewall, and internet router, would be in your Wi-Fi device, which is given to you by your service provider. So that is a single device playing all the role. But when we are talking about corporate network, probably these will be different devices who are doing different tasks, but every device has its own work to do. This is how a small network looks into physical world. Let's see how the same works into AWS world. Let's talk about that. So now I am trying to explain you the concept of things in AWS. In AWS, we do not give you access to directly of a physical server. You get access to EC2 machines. So you have your EC2 machine, which is equivalent to your servers into the cloud. Then these network interfaces are still required, but we have a different way of giving you the network interfaces. This is called ENI, which stands for Elastic Network Interface. So this elastic network interface would be created, and once this ENI is ready, you should be able to have your traffic sent out. We do not have a concept of VLANs in AWS cloud, but we are utilizing here something called subnet. They are equivalent, they are similar, they give you the isolation you are looking for, but you do not get access to a network switch directly. We had to implement it through something called a subnet, and we will discuss them in detail, don't worry. Instead of calling a router, we call that mechanism of routing called routing table. So routing table will decide how your packet will be transferred from one network to another network and what kind of data would be going through that. That will all happen through your routing table, right? Firewalls, yes, we have firewall to for protection, and they are implemented by security group and network ACL, which stand for access control list. Now, a disclaimer here. For explanation, I have said that this is a firewall, but in we will discuss this in our next sections that the security group and network ACL are not implemented at this layer. Right now in picture, what you are seeing that my firewall in physical world is implemented on the perimeter layer when we are meeting the external network. But in cloud, we go and provide better security. And for that, we use security group and network ACL. We will have a dedicated discussion probably next week on these things and we'll see how it actually works. Right. For routing, yes, we use routers, which is internet router, which are called IGW, which is referred as internet gateway. And through this, you are able to communicate. So as you could see, there is not lot of a difference between a physical world and a virtual world or AWS world. But now I am going to introduce a component which is very unique in AWS. I hope everyone is following along here. The next component I am introducing here is called a VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. So what AWS is doing, that they create this networking here and they give you a private space to run your networking. We don't want that if you create something and it creates problem with others or others create something which creates problem for you, it is not a good design. So you get a isolated architecture or isolated place to run your networking, and that is called a VPC, which stand for virtual private cloud. So VPC is your own networking space in which you create your servers. When you host your routing table, you create firewall solution, you create internet gateway. So all of this will be created inside a Amazon VPC. And now I would explain more on what VPC is and how it is implemented. Okay. I hope everyone is following along and you would be able to understand it. VPC is a SDN. I would defer there. SDN, which they are mentioning, SDN is your software defined network. I would say this is a combination of both the things, right? Why things are little differently implemented in AWS? Let me give an example. When AWS started building applications and they wanted to have a network which could scale to thousands of customers, which could have petabyte of data being transferred, and that time AWS started checking different vendors for the equipment they manufacture. Right. So they had to check a lot of vendors. All these vendor could not give the scale AWS was looking for. So what AWS had to do, AWS had to build their own networking from ground up. So probably the hardware we use for running this, probably the software we use for it, it is all being indigenously created by AWS for very specific use cases. It is not a commercial hardware like a Cisco or Juniper network. We have to build our own hardware and software because none of the vendor could give us the scale and the security we were looking for. So it is a form of SDN, which is called software delivered network, but it is also having its own hardware component behind the scene. Right. So hopefully this thing is clear. Let's focus on now Amazon VPC. What is a VPC and why we create it? Why we create it? First reason, we need isolation. So I want to keep my workload isolated. So that's why I would be creating my VPC. Whatever I do within this box won't go outside unless I add those components. Right. So you are living in a house. Consider initially when you designed the house, there was no door. So you are living inside, and if you have to go outside, you would be then adding doors here, and we will discuss different type of door you could add. But unless you have a door, you are keeping everything inside a VPC. Right? VPC is a regional entity. And in every region, we give you something called a default VPC. So a default VPC already exists for every region. Why we give that? So that if you are not coming from networking, you are a developer and you just want to deploy a EC2, you should not worry about all the stuff. You can use default VPC if you want. But most of the time, you would be using VPC created by own use cases. So first thing you would be creating to host application probably will be a VPC. Right. Now, if I am having a region here, a region is made up of availability zones, right? We already saw that. And for simplicity, I am not adding all the availability zones here, but I am just adding some of them here. See this. So what I have here, I have two availability zone. So when my VPC is created, that VPC would spread across multiple availability zones as we see here. So this would be spread across multiple availability zone. When I create a VPC, I just have to provide some very basic information and I would be good to get started. I do not need to have lot of setting configured. I could go ahead with the very basic setting and later I could then customize it as per my own requirement. So give me a minute. I would go ahead and deploy a VPC. Somehow my keyboard is not working as expected. My, sorry, here I'm coming up. I'm trying to type. Come on. aws.amazon.com. Now it works. So we will go there and we will first see the default VPC and we'll create our own VPC. And we will build things step by step. We won't be creating everything in one shot, though it is possible, but we will build things one by one, subnet, then route table, and then association, then net gateway. That's what we are going to build here. So I'm signing into console and VPC is a regional entity to have to select which region I'm interested in. Let's say I want to see things into Oregon. So that's fine. And here I would search for the service, which is VPC, and read this instruction which says isolated cloud resources. So yes, we would be creating resources in an isolated manner. Let's go ahead and see that. A default VPC exists in all region unless you have deleted it. How to identify that? It would have a name, oh, sorry, it would have a tag which will tell that it is a default VPC. Right. So there you see there are two VPCs for me here. VPCs US West 2, two VPCs on that. And here is this VPC, see this one. This one. If you keep on scrolling here, it will tell you that is this a default VPC or not. So the bottom one is a default VPC which is created by AWS for me. I have not asked, but it will automatically be there in my account. So this is the VPC which I get by default. And I have one more clue here. This will have a IP address in the range 170 to 31. So in every region you go, you would find a IP address range of 170 to 31 for your default VPC. Right now, my interest is to create a VPC. Let me go ahead and create a VPC here. What I have to specify that I have to say what I am looking for. Am I looking to create VPC only or more? Maybe I am just creating VPC. Let me call it BESA VPC 01. Done. I have to provide a IP address range. This is a big umbrella IP address range, and from that, smaller IP addresses range will be used for your for your subnet. I am trying to keep here is a 10.0.0.0/16 as an IP address range. Right now, question to you. Probably some of you know the answer. Let me know. Let me show you the VPC again, and I'll ask you this question whether it is valid or not. So I'm going back to VPC console. I will show you what exists already, and we will then come back to the creation screen again. Give it few seconds, let it render. Probably I should have selected Ireland as a region. It would be much faster to render, or London. So now I am here into VPCs, and if I go and further check, probably I already have a VPC, which is my VPC 02, and it is using the same IP address range 10.0.0/16. So my question is, this VPC already exists in Oregon, and I am now trying to create same IP address range VPC in Oregon. Will I be allowed or will I be denied from creating it? What do you think would be happening in this case? What do you think? Would I be allowed to create this VPC or will I be getting an error? Conflict, it is allowed, it is a private range which can be used, denied, conflict. Let me do that, right? Better to see this thing in happening. Create VPC, done. I provided the IP address range and I did not get any error. Remember the statement I made. VPCs are isolated resources. So it is still okay to have the same IP address range for VPC, but it is not very practical because now I have created architecture where these two VPC would never be peering with each other because they are running into the same IP address range. So technically it is allowed, but we should avoid it because it would have connectivity issues if we plan to expand our network. But technically, yes, you could do. What could be use cases for this? Sometimes customers say that, hey, I want the exact same IP addresses for my production system. And when I'm testing, I also need the same exact set of IP addresses. So that's why you may be allowed to create it, but not a good thing if you are creating issue, if you are planning to peer these VPC, but I have created a VPC, right? So I'll focus on this BESA VPC. Now there was a question that what IP address range you would be using, and let me read the question again. It was an interesting question. How do you know how to choose an address range? Good question there. Right. Now, what do we mean by that? We have to ensure or we have to think that what my network requirements are. For that, we have to go a little bit on the networking. Let's talk about something called private IP address ranges. So what private IP address ranges are? These are something which I can use internally, and these are non-routable IP addresses. So in IP address which we talked from 000 to 255.255, some of the IP addresses are kept for internal purposes, and that is displayed here. See this one. So if any IP address is in the range of 10.00 up to 10.2555, that is a class A private IP. This one is a class B private IP 170 to 16 something and 190 to something. So from the whole range, some sections are kept for private communication. So you would be deciding on which range you want to use. You could use any of them, right? So Depending on what range you want to use, you could select any of the classes, but only on this. If I am trying to create a VPC with the IP address range which is not private, I may have an issue. Let's go ahead and try that. So I say I want to create a VPC. Let's call it a test VPC and see this. Let's say I put here that 1.1.0.0/16. That is the IP address range I am trying to put. See, done. Why you think so happen? Still happening, but we are not allowed to then use this as a public mechanism. Technically, internally, whatever IP address I want to do, I can, but this is not something which will work for internet routing because this is not having a valid private IP address range. Connectivity would be an issue in this VPC. Technically, you can create it because it is isolated as of now, but it would have problem when I create further networking component on that, right? So hopefully this thing is clear. Now, I would be selecting the range of the IP address depending on how many nodes I want to keep or how many subnets I want to keep there. So let's go to a simple setting CIDR.xyz. Here you would know what IP address to use. So you have to design that what does this 16 means. That's what I am now talking here. Uh, we will discuss that. So what I did here, I said 10.0.0 and that said 16, right? We discussed this last time little bit. So 16 here says I want to keep first 16 bits of this 32-bit for my network and remaining 16 bits I want to keep for host naming. Or if I have put it like this /8, that means I would be keeping first 8 bits for my network address and remaining 3 bits will be for my host addresses. So if I am having /8, see this, I would have these many these many IP addresses for my host because now I have these total 30 to 24 bits available for me to provide IP addresses to my host. So that will be giving me a better large space for my application, right? Check my last video. I explained through a building example, like if you are using a building and naming system there, how you would number the building. So that will give you more idea. Now, instead of that, if I have created it as /24, which means I have less number of bits for host, and now I would have only 256 hosts available. So depending on my use case, I would be selecting the IP address range, which gives me sufficient IPs so that I could distribute to my machine. So if I plan to have only below 200 hosts in my network, this is fine. But if I feel I would be needing more hosts, then I should use a different IP address altogether. Right. So that is the way how I would be creating a VPC and would be selecting a IP address range associated with it. So once I create a VPC, this is whole network created for me. And once this is ready, I would then start hosting or creating subnets inside. Subnet is a logical isolation within it, like a VLAN. So VPC spans across multiple availability zone and it has a bigger IP address range. So let's say this, sorry, give me a minute. This was the IP address range we have selected 10.0.0/16. And now I am carving smaller pieces of that like a pizza slice, and that pizza slice is my subnet, right? So I have one subnet here which I am calling 10.0.1.0/24. So from these, this is my network address, and in this bits I am playing, and I say 1.0/24, 2.0/24. So these are the portion of the bigger chunk which I would be associating with my subnet, and I can create multiple subnet if the need be. Like I can create a public subnet called 10.0.1.0.24. Subnet exists within an availability zone. So let me go ahead to a VPC and try to create something called a subnet here, right? I hope everyone is following along and understanding why we are creating a VPC and how it is being created. So why is more important if you are a solution architect, not just the what. What is more important for people who are in operations, who are doing maintenance, who are doing implementation, so they would know how to do it and what to do it. But why would be more important for you as solution architect. So let me create a subnet here. I have to select a VPC. So this is my BESA VPC 01. I would be giving it a name. Now name is just for identification purpose to make your life much easier. So I would be using here some name as a friendly name so that we would have a better idea on what we are trying to achieve here. So I would call it public, sorry, public AZA. AZA stands for here for availability zone A, right? And I would be putting it intentionally into US West 2A, which is my availability zone 1A, and I would be putting some IP address range here. Let's go ahead. Come on. Somehow my keyboard is not working as expected today. I think some key got pressed somewhere. 10.0.0 slash sorry 1.0/24. So that is the first IP address I have selected. Range I have selected, and I am given it a name public AZA, and I would create a subnet. Right, one subnet ready. Public is just a name. Right now, it is not actually having any public resources. We'll discuss them in a minute. So one subnet ready. If I want, I could go ahead and create another subnet. I have to select which VPC I want. And in that VPC, I would again give it a name. Let's say I call it private and call it AZA. Right, so that is another subnet, and this I am creating again into 2A, and probably for this I want to use 10.0.11.0/24 as my IP address range, and I would be creating subnets like this. So subnet is a logical isolation which I am creating, and through these subnets I am able to add resources on that. So if I'm now looking for searching only for the VPC of my choice, these are the two subnet which I have just created in public AZA and private AZA, right? And you can follow this and create subnet across availability zones like this: 10.11.0 here, 20.12.0 here. And now once these subnets are ready, think of subnet like a wire, and on this wire you can now keep on adding your resources. So once your wires are connected, once your network has been laid out, now you would start adding resources here. Like you would have a resource like machine here A, and then you would have another instance here called B, C, D, and E, F, and G, H. So these instances can be now hosted on in a VPC. Instance are running within a VPC, but from connectivity perspective, they connect to a subnet, and a subnet scope is a availability zone, nothing beyond it. In a real world, do companies use default VPC, create their own, and what if I delete default VPC? Anuj, it depends, I would say. If I am using a lot of serverless architectures, probably I do not need VPC at all. You get the point? So there's no general answer to the question that do they use. It depends on the company to company. If I am the person, I would probably avoid it. Why? Let me give an example. What is happening? That default VPC, let's say this is in North Virginia and this is in Ireland. In all the places, my default VPC IP address is same: 172.31.xx, 172.31.xx, which means in future, if I had to pair these two, it won't be possible. And that's why I don't see a point in using default VPC, and maybe this VPC is created with /16, which I do not need, and that's why I may want to use a different IP address scheme. But if you want, nobody is stopping you, but I do not see this being followed in a regular practice because of one concern which I just shared, and second is that it may have /16, which you may not be looking for, or which may be small or large enough for your workload. So it depends on what you want to achieve from it. Right. Good. So once my machines are ready, we can then start communicating across them. Right. We will talk about that in some time. But I want to ask services which requires VPC. Anyone? What services in AWS would require a VPC? They won't exist without a VPC. Anyone? What are the some of the services we are aware which requires a VPC to function? EC2 RDS, exactly. So Amazon EC2 is one of the service. Then Amazon RDS is one of them. Relational database services. Yes. What else? Not probably everyone knows, but EC2, before VPC came, there are something called classic EC2. They can exist outside of VPC also. So that is little, it means it is not no more available, but you may find some customer running their workload from very long old time, which may even run outside of VPC, because VPC came later. Initially it was Amazon EC2, right? So VPC came later, but yes, I would agree, Amazon EC2 RDS, we would use that. Then EMR, somebody mentioned Elastic Map Reduce. Yes, this would be running within a VPC. When you are deploying a load balancer, that would be again running within a VPC. Lambda, I would call Lambda as an amphibious animal, because this could run within a VPC or it could run outside of VPC also. So that would be a different story altogether. Right. So Lambda can exist within a VPC and it can work outside of VPC also. So that is possible. Right. ELB, yes. Databases, yes. Not every database, Manish. Like if you have sorry, Manisha, I guess so Manisha, not every database, it could be a database like DynamoDB, it doesn't require a VPC, it works outside of that. So not everything. Direct connect, yes, direct connect would allow you to communicate, so you could utilize it for your communication channel, so that would be required. VPC endpoint, yes, it would require that VPC. VPN connection would require a VPC. So yes, these are some of the services which would require VPCs to function. But as you could see, this list is small. AWS has 200 plus services, and maybe around 20 can be running within a VPC. Most of them run outside of VPC. So we would talk about how to expand our network and how to add those services and how all these components will work together. So to summarize, we are nearing to the point of the timeline. So we talked about what is a VPC, why we need it, and what are the basic component to create a VPC. We would expand on this. Next topic, we would add more component here, we would create communication channel between them, and we'll see how all these things will be working together, right? So we would expand on that, and you would have access to this slide, and I would also be adding the service summary card of VPC, so you should have no problem in reading a little bit more, but we will expand more of this into the next chapter, so you would be having this VPC slide also, right? So I hope everyone is following along. If there is a feedback, anything we can do differently, anything which is making your life easier or it makes your learning easier, let us know. We would be happy to add those things for this. All right. Mostly global. Little depends, Babita, I would say, because we have services here like your global accelerator, and then global accelerator can work with VPC, though it is a global service, but it can work with VPC. So I would say yes, partially what you are saying is right, but exceptions always exist in AWS. There are services which has more beyond a VPC or they operate within a VPC also. So I hope everyone has followed along. Now, uh, I guess everyone is following along. And if you have any suggestions, any questions, let us know. I would add Prasad now, and Prasad would now walk us through some of the components related to uh, Amazon S3 implementation, that how S3 can be used for practical things. Prasad, you want to share your screen so that I can add it to stream?
Yes, I would. Hello,
Good.
everyone. And thanks, Ashish. As always, really informative.
Thank you.
Let
And
me.
everyone, feel free to post your questions. If you have any question, reach out to us on LinkedIn. Any follow-ups you have, any feedback you have, let us know. See, we don't know what can be done to improve it, right? So if we need your suggestion, we need your help so that we can make it better for everyone and everyone would learn something out of it. Okay, I'm adding your screen now, Prasad.
Yeah,
Yeah, it should be here. Good, thank you.
cool. So we'll be looking into few of the S3 hands-on, and we'll be spending most of this, like remaining 29 minutes on the console. But before that, I want to, so that you can have the resources handy. These are the workshops that we will look into today, and depending upon time, we'll see how much we can do it hands-on and how much you will be doing on your own in your own time. So for the first one that we have, uh, Ashish talked about, like S3 and how great S3 is, and you store a lot of data, right? But how about if you want to, like run some queries on that data? Would you be actually moving that data? Let's say if the data is in a relational format, would you be moving the data into relational database? Or is there a way you can query that data using simple SQL on S3 itself. So the first workshop would be based on that, which is Amazon S3 Select. We'll be able to query data without using servers or database. The second thing that we'll be looking is about S3 Object Lambda. It's about, let's say you have a specific data that is stored in S3 and you want to have different views of that data. Then will you be creating different copies of it? Or you can use a feature so that every user can have different kind of view, and we'll dive deep into that. And then finally, we would be having a storage immersion day, and that has labs for multiple things. Again, word of caution is that while you're doing these hands-on in your own account, be aware of the costs that it can incur. Cool. So let's get into the workshops bits. So we'll start with the first one, which I said is Amazon S3 Select querying data without servers or databases. The deck would be shared. It has the links, but if anyone wants to do it right now, let me paste this link on the chat window right away, so that in case if you want to follow along. Just one sec. Yeah, here it is. Now let's understand first what S3 Select is. As the name suggests, S3 Select, if I open this link, and I'll open another link also because it is taking a lot of time. So it's better that I open 2 links at a time, and hopefully they will load in the background. Yeah. So S3 object content. So what exactly S3 does is that it allows
Prasad,
you
can I say something?
to use simple statement.
Prasad, can you zoom it in a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Is it better
better.
now?
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So it allows you to actually use simple SQL statements. It can query objects in the following formats. So if you have like files that are in CSV format or JSON or Parquet format, you should be able to use S3 to actually run queries on top of it. Use S3 Select feature, and you should be able to do that, right? Documentation has few more details. What exactly you can do? Select from where limit. Anyone who is aware of SQL would be knowing that, like these are the simple SQL statements. So you'll be able to run queries like select star from the from clauses, the where clauses and stuff, right? So let's do a quick lab on that. So go through the description in your own time, but let's start. So here it's a phone book search. It has a simple phone book, and let me in fact like show what the phone book entails. It's a simple CSV file, sample data.csv. It's a CSV file like this. Again, I'll zoom in a bit. Hold on. That has a name, number, city, and occupation. And this is what is stored in S3, right? So how would you query it? The workshop is about that. So to first set up the workshop, it has 3 ways to do it. You can do is a quick start, and we'll start with this. And then you can even build from the source, the Python and the TypeScript if you want to change anything in the Lambda files. In case if you want to add your own query or something, you can do that. But let's start with the quick start one. 3 steps in each of them: the setup, the usage, the cleanup, and we'll look into it. First, the setup. They have a CloudFormation template. through which you will be able to create it. First of all, it says create a S3 bucket. Ashish did so, show how to create a S3 bucket, and then upload the sample data file. So let's go to S3 and let me again. Hopefully this should be good enough. I did already create a bucket with phone book demo. And if you see in this, I already uploaded the sample data, and it is saying to upload the sample data. Okay, let me increase the, make it 200% by default, I think. Yeah, hopefully this should be fine. Ashish, is the font size okay now? Cool. Yeah, I think so. Okay, cool. Now, yeah, it's asked us to create and upload these two samples, and I already done those. This is the sample data, and this is the Lambda code. And we'll look into here how you can build them depending upon the time that we have. And then go to AWS console, select CloudFormation, and upload the stack. So I already created that, but I'll show you the steps. Now, again, like we can, it's always for productivity perspective, always better to have multiple tabs rather than updating the same tab again. So generally, what I do is that CloudFormation, right click, open new tab. It creates. And let me again increase 200. Now this is the stack that got created. Now let's understand what all it will create. Now it should create all the resources that are shown in this architecture diagram. That is the API gateway, the Lambda, right? So let's look into that. So if you look into, let's the output, it gives me an endpoint, right? And we'll look into how to use that, right? Let me open this. It's too much zoomed. Let me make it 175. Hopefully that will be fine. Yeah. Then let's look into the resources it has created. It has created an API gateway. It has created few web ACLs, the S3 select, and a demo Lambda function. So let's look into those things. Let's go to first of all, before doing that, we'll have to, because this is the endpoint that we'll be using. So let us copy it as I've copied it onto a notepad that I have here. Cool. And now I'll go to, I can go to the Lambda from here itself. I'll go to the resources. And this is the Lambda function. So I'll go here, go to the Lambda function. And see, I'll have an API gateway. So all of these are created. How all of them are created? It's a CloudFormation template. Let me, hold on. How many of you know CloudFormation or know how to use CloudFormation? If is this is a simple CloudFormation, syntax. If you're not aware of CloudFormation, so see, doing through AWS console, management console is something that we should be knowing. But it is always important to know how to do it programmatically, whether it is CLIs are mostly, like automating the code. So either it is Terraform or CloudFormation or CDK or Pulumi, but you should be knowing at least one of the infrastructure as code, right? So for that, let me, for anyone, okay, let's go back to this. And anyone who has not used CloudFormation or is not aware of CloudFormation, yes, we have this AWS workshop that will go through the basics of exactly what the cloud formation is and gives you a good hands-on experience. So I'll suggest everyone to go through this. It is good to know how to navigate the AWS Management Console, but in real production life, probably you will not be even having access to the AWS console. If you're a developer, you'll be mostly navigating it through the infrastructure as code and deployment tools and the pipelines. So again, let me again zoom it a bit. And this goes through your basics, intermediate, advanced, all of it. So it will teach from the very beginning to the end. So let me put this workshop link onto the chat. Okay. Working with Terraform, great. And then do you have to learn all the that language or okay, it's not a language. It's a JSON or like a YAML templates that you can, it's not like a Python or TypeScript. We'll talk about that also when you can like do CDK. But it's a simple JSON or YAML scripts, and it is a set format, right? And it's quite intuitive. And then if you're using editors like let's say VS Code, you will be having IntelliSense too, right? No, no one will be able to ever learn that JSON. No one will be able to learn that. So it's all very logical. It's all about understanding it rather than trying to learn it. And once you understand it, it'll be really easy. Okay, going back to the topic. Let me go here. This is what the CloudFormation template is, which talks about the function that it gets created, the code URI, the environment, the API gateway it gets created. All of this is defined here as a code. And when you run this, all those resources are automatically provisioned, right? So, and when it's provisioned, if you see here, this is your Lambda function that is being the source of that is API gateway. So when you call a URL, API gateway is the front end. It gets called. It's a post. I'm trying to click on it. Then API gateway calls the Lambda function. The Lambda function actually has the logic to run the query through using the S3 select, go into the S3 bucket, retrieve the data, and pass it back. So that request, it goes to the Lambda function that we have looked. We'll look into the code of that in a moment. It goes through the response and gives us a response. So to use it, if you go, so the setup is done. So if you look at the usage part here, it says that in the output tab, we do have the link, right? And we copied that using Postman or curl. Again, if you're not aware of these terms, then these are the ways how you can test a API. You can issue a command and the URL. So this is the URL, a simple URL. What this URL is, it's giving the parameters and sending a post method to this particular URL. So let's try and run this. So what I'll do is I'll open my, again, let me see how I can increase the font. Text. Okay, cool. Now if I go to the notepad, so this is what our URL is, and that was the curl statement. So I'm going to use this URL in the curl statement. So I'm going to run this command. So the URL that we have created, it is going to post with these parameters, and it should be able to get the data. So it says the occupation is specialist solutions architect, phone number, and blah blah blah. So it was able to get the all the data for the name Onyx. So if we go into our CSV file that we had, right, result for Onyx through a select query. Now, how the select query looks like, let's look into that. Now, so this was, and once you do that, do cleanup. And if you would like to change the query something, build from here. And this is where CDK comes into picture. CDK again is infrastructure, actually is code. So if I, as we have CloudFormation, similarly, we have something called CDK where you can write your infrastructure in a known programming language, like your TypeScript or Python or C Sharp. So instead of using JSON or YAML, anyone who's coming from developer background, it will be useful for them. Again, nothing to learn, mainly to understand. Cool. So going back here, so here if you go to build from source, like in Python, right? It'll, for the setup part, it'll ask you to set up in your account, and then there will be CDK that is required, so, right? And then you can use to the CDK. Now what I'm going to show you is the code of that Lambda function now. Let's look into the code of that Lambda function. This is in TypeScript, but the downloadable has that code even in Python. So you can, depending upon which language you're comfortable with. So it, again, everything is defined here in, instead of CloudFormation, this is defined here in CDK. Again, API gateway. If you see, it's quite logical in a way, the way it is being structured. Right, it has a input serialization and the output serialization. Expression type is SQL and the sample data. What I want to and in the S3 client, it is going to select object context. So it is the method. We are using the select object with the params, and how to create those params is here. Params is select object command input. The expression here is query builder. Now this is important. The query builder that is being used. If you go here, query builder, and this is where the query is. Select star from S3 object, where name like, that's what we searched, the name like Onyx. If the key is occupation, you can even search by key based, because this is the query that has been built out. You can either search by name or occupation or city, and you'll be able to get the entire data. And there is an AND operation here. Now, if you're just getting started with AWS, this all might seem a bit overwhelming. So do not get overwhelmed. All I'm trying to say is that that is why we have 3 different levels. Quick start is how you can do without even looking into the code and just understanding from the high level perspective, using it yourself, and then dive deep into the CloudFormation. So always try and use the CloudFormation as much as possible. But if you are coming from a developer background and you are switching to AWS, you might want to look into here TypeScript and Python. So depending upon it, like everyone has their own mileage, right? So depending upon that, look into which one do you like to use. Okay, 8 minutes left. I think we should move on to the next one. Let me look into if there are any questions. Hold on. Thank you, Parna, for oh wow. Thank you, Parna, for taking care of the questions and sharing the resources. Is a guide I've never done. Yeah, don't be intimidated. It's all about a bit of practice. Once you and you will see that things are very easy. Once you get started, you will feel that things are very logical and things are very easy. How much coding do we need to know for solutions architect? It's always like a question, and if you ask me, I generally say no, it's not required at all. Depending upon what it's a good to have, not must to have. Do you have auto complete while writing ISC? Yes, if you use Visual VS Code, you would be having there are autocomplete functionalities or intelligence functionalities, I would say. How hard is to get associate developer certificate without SAA first? Okay, it's like I believe between the three. And again, it comes from my personal opinion based on my background. I come from a developer background. Developer associate cert is the easiest one. But anyways, Ashish is from training certification team. I think he will be able to, put more color. But I believe from the difficulty wise, developer associate is the easiest, and sysops associate is the most difficult, and SA associate sits in between. But that is because I come from developer background. Probably if someone comes from administration background, they might find it in a different order. Okay, cool. Now, looking into time, let's move on to the next one. For the next one, let me go and open the. Oh yes, in fact, I wanted to spend more time on S3 object lambda instead of this one. So S3 select is great in case if you want to query something, right? In a SQL format. But S3 object lambda is, is a great feature. And I'll go to the documentation first to explain it a bit. So if it is lambda, we understand that there can be some code that has been added to the lambda. So you can add your own code to S3 get, the functionalities that we have, head, which returns the metadata, and list request to modify and process the data as it is returned to the application. So let's say if you have one set of data and you want to have multiple kinds of views, and I'll tell one good example of that, why it will be required. Then there are either ways to make a copies of it, and each application using the individual copy, or you can try and add the transformation capabilities when you're accessing the data in a serverless fashion. And that's what S3 object lambda is. So here it is. If you look into this diagram, it says you can create a lambda function and you can configure the S3 object lambda access point, and we'll be doing a lab of that. Then whenever you will invoke that lambda through the access point for S3 get head and list, it is going to transform the data and give to the application accordingly. Right? Now, one use case of why it will be required. Let's say you have information that has PII data, that is personally identifiable information, right? Now, a lot of people might be needing access to the data, but based on the user, the role of the user, they might be able to see their credit card numbers, they might be able to see their phone numbers, they might not be able to do. Based on the requirements, the data should be masked. So either we mask the data and keep a separate copy of that data, or we keep the original copy and ensure that based on the roles who is accessing, they get only the relevant data of that. So the lambda function is invoked. customer proprietary code is invoked to retrieve the data from S3 and scramble sensitive data out of the object from the S3, and then that is delivered. Now, this is what the workshop will be about. S3 object lambda redaction workshop. Okay. Now, you might be thinking that to implement this functionality in a Lambda, right, that I have a S3 bucket, let's say, and if I go back to the same example, let's say I have this. And this, let's say, has more information like credit card numbers, their address and everything, their social security numbers, their Aadhaar numbers and everything. And based on who is accessing, you want to mask some of the data. Then you'll have to write the code, right, based on who is accessing, what data should be accessible in the Lambda. But now we do have a way to do that. So I'm not sure if you have heard of Amazon Comprehend. So Amazon Comprehend is an NLP tool which can help you do that. But the beauty is that we already have a Lambda that can be used as it is in the serverless application repository. Right? Now, serverless application repository, again, something for later date, we will dive deep in, is it has already the pre-assembled, like modules that you can use directly. So if I go back here into the console, and if I go to serverless application repository, so if I go to the available applications, and which are publicly available for everyone. So there are these many which you can automatically use as it is. So it has a lot of functionality already for you. So if I want to use the one to redact sensitive information, already have comprehend PII redaction S3 object lambda. So I can simply deploy this. With some parameters that it has. So you don't need to create those things because a lot of functionality can create your. Cool. I'll let it load. I know we are on time, so I'll take another couple of minutes to wrap this up. So here are the few of the application settings which you can configure, and you can read more about, how to use these, and then deploy. It is going to automatically deploy. So, and I already have it deployed in my Lambda. If I go to the Lambda functions, I have one of the comprehend one deployed. And through this, I will be able to actually get different information from different roles. So if you look into this object lambda workshop, it deploys separately for admin user and separately for billing user and customer service. So admin user should be able to see all of them. Billing user should be able to see their probably credit card details, something like that. And customer service should not be able to see those details. So based on the rules or users a role that you have, you will be providing different kinds of settings for the same Lambda function. And accordingly, you will be setting up the Lambda access points so that when you'll be testing the solution, based on the role that you have assumed, you'll be seeing that corresponding data. So try this out, and it will be a good, way to see how it all works. And the final one that I have for you folks is AWS Storage Immersion Day. Now, this is something that we as solutions architects use to train our customers and partners, anyone who is getting started. We do a full day immersion day for them, in which we go through all of these modules for them. And as you'll see, it will just not include S3, it also includes EFS, also includes data about the data migration, about how we can use the services like data sync or file gateway, all those kinds of things, and the backup. How can you do backups, right? So obviously, depending upon how much dive deep you want to do and what your area of expertise is, you can go ahead and do the pick and choose the labs that you would like to do. All of them can be done separately. You don't do, like it's not like it's a pick and choose. Like you can, it's like a Lego blocks that you can pick and choose. But again, be conscious of the cost that it might incur. So always run this, whatever you will create, delete the cloud formation template. So it's another good way why you should be using ISE, is that because if you create manually on your AWS management console, you might forget, and then you will keep looking into the cross-region resources. If you create through cloud formation template, you can always delete cloud formation template, and that's pretty much, you have a clean account. That's all from me for today. So, yep, thank you all, and see you all next week.
Thank you, Prasad. And let me add you also into the chat now. So, yeah, what Prasad has shared was some of the basic stuff which can be used. And don't feel overwhelmed if you are just starter. I would give you some more resources so that you can practice on it. Now, let me share something here before we call it end. This is called free labs available onto your. Let me check 1 minute. This is available on Quick Labs. Sometime I forgot things. So you could go to Quick Labs, and through Quick Labs, you should be able to get a free lab deployed for you, and you can practice there. You have to search a little bit for that free lab because it is not by default displayed. Let me quickly share that link here onto the BESA web page. So on BESA web page, you will find from previous session that there is a Quick Labs link available, and we will be putting that into the resources section also. So if I'm here on the Quick Labs, and let me put this URL into the chat, what you could do here, you could search for the catalog. You would need an account, but the account is free. At least all the free resources you can use. And let's say now I am looking for Amazon S3. So I'm searching for activities related to Amazon S3, which is available for me, right? So give it few seconds and it should be delivering some details to me. And once I have that activities, I should be able to practice on that. Check for free, and that free would be giving you all the data related to performing all the labs and performing operations. It's not working as of now, but I will share the link into the BESA page section. So you should have that link available. Let me check quickly. I'm going to BESA program page, and how do you get resource folder? That's what I'm showing you here right now. So if you go to BESA website, there is a additional resources section on the left side, this one, and here we have put together resources based on every sessions we have delivered so far. So it is batch 3, the last session we had, and I would say go for batch 1 because that is where we covered the most of the basic stuff, right? So here if I'm going, I can go to week 2, and in week 2 I would find the details of Amazon S3. We discussed it there. So here is my PDF file of that session, reinvent videos which are useful to watch, some general information, and see this practice. Introduction to Amazon Simple Storage Service. This is a quick lab. You would need an account. This account can be created for free. And now once I am here, I should be searching for it. The link get dynamically generated. So I can't share a link, but I'm showing you the way. Come here and search for storage related stuff, and you would be finding lots of things on storage here. So see this storage and CDN, digital media, sysadmin for AWS, and similarly I can search for just Amazon storage service or Amazon S3, and hopefully I should be seeing some of the quest I can go to. So 23 result. Now in that, if you see, this one says 8 credits, so this would require you some money, but similarly you will find something which will be free. Right, see this introduction to simple storage service. So this is a place where you can go, start a lab, follow some instruction, upload an object to S3, make an object public. So all instructions are given. They will give you all the details you need, and you should be able to practice around. Shouldn't be a problem at all. So amazon.quicklabs.com, search for the specific service, sorry, specific topic, and you should get free labs. You just need an account, nothing else is required to practice on this method. So that should be much easier for you to all follow along, right? So resources section is your go-to place. We have lots of information, and if you enjoy the session, please put detail on LinkedIn, share on LinkedIn, let your friends know, spread the word about this so that more people can get benefited out of it. The Twitch channel would be live for 1 week, means the session is available to replay in 1 week, and within a week we will upload it onto YouTube like we did for the last session. So it should be available to you there also. All right. Any final questions, anyone? Any other thoughts? Anything which you want to share, talk about? There was a question on SAA that will you be sharing some detail about solution architect certification? So we are working on that. Let me show the question here. So question are, do you ever have QA webinar for solution architect day-to-day work? So yes, we will be talking about that. And Prasad and Jamila and then James, Michelle, they are all a solution architect. So they would be sharing more detail on their day-to-day job. So we will talk about that also. All right. Any last minute questions, anyone? Anything which is not clear, please let us know, and we would be happy to add all this information into the channel, and you should have no problem at all in accessing that. All right. So thank you, and thank Abhijit for answering the question in the chat, and feel free to reach out to us. This is the link for the resources page on the screen. You can see it, and we hope to you in the next session. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day.